Hey, I'm Drew. Welcome to our backyard water park.
Last summer I made a full build video about this cool backyard water park. That video is over half an hour long and outlines every single step of the build, from the lumber to the plumbing to the finishing touches. And since we're getting back to that warm time of year, I thought I'd put out a condensed version of this water park to inspire people for some summertime builds.
That gets you pretty good there.
So for this build, I'm using all pressure treated lumber, and starting off with the base I have some 2x6s. And I'm just fastening these together into a rectangle using some 3-inch deck screws for now. And then for my vertical posts, I'm using some 4x4s. For the upper level, I'm using some more 2x6s. And then for the roof, I'm using some 2x4s that are cut to the angle to match the slope of the roof. And then I notched each rafter out with the jigsaw to sit nicely on the top plate. Once everything was screwed into place, I used some 3/8" carriage bolts to permanently bolt all the major pieces together. Then I started installing some deck board. Before I installed too much of the decking on the ground, I wanted to get all the plumbing in place, so I built up this little half wall. And then I used a Forstner bit to drill through one of the 4x4s to be the main water infeed. For all the water lines, I'm using this flexible PEX pipe. So I fed a length through the hole, and then I crimped on some PEX fittings as well as a hose end adapter so I can just plug the hose right into this as the water source. Then I split this line into 5 different water lines because there's going to be 5 different features on this water park. The hose really only has enough water volume to feed about 1 or 2 of these lines at a time, so each one has a valve to shut them off as they're not being used, and then the ones that are being used have full pressure. So I started running water lines all over these structures, and with all 5 lines roughly laid out where they needed to go, I installed the rest of the deck boards. Now I can flip this whole unit over and start installing the floor jets. I just have these hose end sprayers that I screwed onto the end of the PEX fitting, and then I just poked these up through some holes I drilled in the decking. And this deck now has 5 floor jets coming through it. These can also be twisted to increase or decrease the spray pattern, just like if they were on the end of a hose. Now onto the roof, I have this $20 clear panel that I got at Home Depot, and I'm just screwing that into place with some metal roofing screws. Well, I have this whole thing tipped over, I'm going to work on my tipping bucket. So I have one of these blue toy bins, and if you have kids around, you almost certainly have one of these bins around. So I drilled a hole through and then fed through this PVC conduit and glued it in place with some construction adhesive. Then I built up a bit of framing above the roof, and then I have this 1/2" threaded rod, and it's going to be the axle of our tipping bucket. So I used some nuts to bolt the bucket into place, and then I just fed the water line up to the top. Now to make a little headway on some more of the structural stuff. I added on this ladder and rock wall onto the first tower. And then I marked out some fresh 2x4s, and using a Forstner bit, I drilled in some indents for the spindles of the railing. These black aluminum spindles just slide into place, and then I screwed in the top and bottom railing using some long deck screws. Now I think one of the coolest parts of this build is the PVC turret gun I mounted on the one railing. So using my bag full of PVC fittings, I just worked away at making a cool gun-shaped gun. I used some 2x4s to make up a base piece that the gun feeds through so that it can pivot up and down. And then I use one of those same garden hose nozzles on the end so that I can adjust the spray pattern and the pressure of the gun. To swivel the whole gun left and right, I use one of these bar seat swivels, mounted onto the base plate as well as onto the top of the railing. And let me tell you, this one was a hit for the kids. Now back to finish off that tipping bucket since I have some new parts. I added on this tether chain so that the bucket can't flip backwards. And then I added on this pull rope that feeds down through the roof so you can pull the rope to dump the bucket whenever you want. I also added a counterweight on the back side of the bucket so it flips back up as soon as it's been dumped. Now I'm adding in a water slide, so I just got this standard playground slide kit and assembled it according to its directions. And then I added in a bit of framing on the upper level of the structure to bolt this slide into place. Then I just used some of this flexible 1/4 inch tubing to run a line over to the slide, and then I drilled 2 holes into the side of the slide body and fed the tubing into them. I then added in a couple drip emitters to stop the tubing from pulling out of the slide and to control the flow a little more. With full pressure on, it's probably a little powerful, but hey, it's up to you, set it however you want. Now we're getting really near the end of this build, and to connect my 2 towers together, I have this rope tunnel that I got online that's usually used to strap it up between 2 trees, but I'm going to modify it a bit to be the bridge between my 2 structures. So I just framed up around the perimeter of the hoops, and then I used these U-clamps to clamp around both ends of the tunnel.
Guess there's no chance of me going through it.
For my 5th and final water feature, I have this mister kit I got cheap on Amazon, and I'm just going to wrap this around some of the wood structure to become a mist wall. This kit's really easy to use. You just cut the tube into length and then plug in these T-adapters and the nozzles go right into them. Couple finishing touches, I added these solar lights onto the exposed ends of the 4x4s, and I put a sandbox in the dead space underneath the 1 tower. And that's my backyard water park complete. Time to test it out. So that's it for this build. I hope it inspired you to tackle some of your own cool down projects this summer. I'd also love to hear from you in the comments, some ideas for some different features that I didn't even touch in this video that would be cool for a 2nd generation of this water park. If you're interested in actually building this, I did put out the full version of this build with about 4 times the amount of detail, and the link's up in the top corner right now. Thanks so much for watching my video, and if you want to go above and beyond in supporting the channel and helping me make even cooler content in the future, the best way to do that is buy some of my merch on the Bunker Branding website. And for those of you wondering where the hell are my new builds, I'm currently ripping up my dad's backyard and working with some of these really nice burled elm slabs, and both of these videos will be out within the next couple weeks to a month, so stay tuned.